so far. I love, like, right now we're just like, every time we start a meetup, we're just going straight into topics. I'm not even bringing out the book anymore. We're just jumping around, and I think that's really cool. Okay, so being glue is a very, very well-known talk for senior plus engineers from Tanya Riley, who's, I think, principal at Squarespace. At least she used to be. I don't know where she's been now. So definitely check this out. I definitely link it in the book, as well as I put it in the chat. The other resource that you should know for what happens after senior is staffeng.com. It's by Will Larson, who is one of my mentors, and it has a lot of interesting stories and guides, which are basically the stories but recut to have a point of view. And one of the most well-known points of view is that there are different archetypes of staff engineer, right? So there's the tech lead, there's the architect, there's solver, the right hand. It seems like, Robin, you're more of a solver / architect type person because you cross a lot of boundaries, but maybe you're a tech lead of the team that you're on. I don't know, but it even give you an idea of like what the calendar looks like, which is pretty cool. It's really nice to see yourself like, all right, yeah, I look more like this. The right hand is the rarest. This is basically just like chief of staff type person. And then Jay, you shared this one. I saw this post, but I didn't really like. It just seemed like he hadn't read Staff Eng. I don't know what your takeaways are on the archetypes that he's talking about.
What I found interesting was, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, like if you had to grow in your career, there was just you just had to become an engineering manager and become a manager and go on. And then at some point, we realized there is tech-focused roles that can be a growth path. And then we set this staff engineer. I don't know, that's what he is mentioning here, but there may be a subtype here. And Brian, Robin was mentioning that, I do a lot of influencing. That's a kind of role, like even the staff engineer's role goes less hands-on and becomes gets into more meetings. But what if there is a role there where you just if you're a 3x engineer, you become a 5x engineer at your company, and you just focus more on your on core contribution. Maybe it's one of those. Like I think one of those roles, the architect may be it. But it's not really influence. It's about becoming like an engineer, just getting more and more deeper, a stronger engineer, and not really trying to influence anything. Just their contribution velocity increases. Maybe as the maybe I that's what I sort of that's the thought that triggered in my mind. Maybe what he's referring to is like we saw the difference between, okay, you don't have to be a manager, you can still be a technical guy. What if we are seeing a 4K GAN where someone can not even go into influence, I'm just heads down, but just my contribution velocity increases instead of going to meetings and doing architecture stuff, sort of a principal engineer sort of thing, right? Whereas I have some,
I've seen people do that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's what I thought. Like maybe there is a fork here where you can stay a senior engineer, but just your contribution just, goes up.
Yeah,
a lot of people would benefit from that. Even a lot of people, especially engineers, are very introverted, don't want to argue. They want to put things out and prove that something works better. Like, I think that path is still unexplored. That's what
it is less explored. I think it's being spelled out more. I think this is basically just the professionalization of our industry, right? The more we do this, the more we find needs and specializations. And on the manager side of things, a lot of the feedback is a lot of people go into management because that's the next tier in the ladder, and then they don't like it. That does a disservice to the people that they manage, and it hurts their career as well, because they suddenly start not performing very well because of it's a very different job. So creating a separate IC track is in a lot of people's interests. Unfortunately, it's not as mature as the manager track. Okay, I think that is, I don't know if anyone has questions or raised hands or anything. That I'm keeping an eye on questions and thoughts. But no, thanks for this discussion. I thought it was really cool. And it's really good to see like people who've been here and are recurring a little bit. So I get a sense of like who's interested in what topic. Okay, there's another thing that we maybe wanted to jump to. So we're going off topic today, like we are every time, and we're going to talk about Max's article from this week. So Max is picking up what I'm putting down with Wardley mapping. I don't know if you heard of Wardley mapping somewhere else apart from me, but he actually posted something this week, and I hadn't had a chance to read it. But let's talk about it, Max.
Yeah, I think it's a very niche topic, Wardley mapping.
Okay, so wait, so first of all, what caught your interest in it?
Yeah, so I'm I'm a business major. So Wardley mapping for me was it really spoke to me because it tried to explain how technology progresses, and where I started off is kind of I was thinking about what are kind of long-term bets on technologies that I want to make for my career. And yes. So that's kind of what I was thinking, right? Like what are really hot topics for the next couple of years? Like what's gonna be like not so hot in the future? And so that's what I was thinking about. And I mean, Wardley mapping basically is a way to map out where a specific kind of, let's say, technology or area, but it's more like an area, not really a technology, is at the moment. And like based on the fact that all of the technologies at the beginning are basically custom built and later on will be commoditized, like you want to be in a space where things are custom built, right, and not commoditized. So like, for example, you used to have like servers that are kind of custom built. You had to rack them, you had to go really in a room, and then you had to put the rack in there, and then you had to cable it up and all of that stuff. And now you can get it from AWS in 5 clicks, right? That's been commoditized completely. So that's not really like, and the problem with commodity is that the moment you kind of are in the commodity space, you are in a race to the bottom in terms of price. That means because you can't kind of, like, everyone has the same commodity, right? So like the only option you have is to cut down the price. So you want to be in the space where it's custom built, kind of. That makes sense.
You want to be in the space where it's custom built?
I think so. I think so.
So depends. So do you want to be the specialist in going from 0 to 1? Is that what I'm hearing from you?
No, I think 0, there's too little money probably, but it's a very long bet. It's a very difficult bet.
Yeah.
But I think really like where you can have like a long-term bet that kind of pays off with a reasonable risk is if you are somewhere like custom built and maybe early product, but I would more say custom built, I would say.
Okay. I basically, I think you should try to cross boundaries. That's my takeaway from it, which is if the state of the world is here, you should bring it here, and you make a lot of money here. If the state of the world is here, you bring it to the next level, you make more money, and even from product to commodity, you can still make a lot of money. Like that's essentially AWS, and it's making a crap ton of money. So there's lots of money in different areas. I think there's a question of like whether you're fit for that stage, because selling commodities is a lot about margins. Selling products is a lot about refining the user experience. Doing custom building is maybe originating in an idea that no one else has had. So maybe I'm being very broad with that generalization, but there's money to be made everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, for those who are following along, this is chapter 28. We're jumping around, but this is the strategy chapter, and I fully agree with like what you're saying about like you're making bets on technology as for careers, right? So I would say I really like this the progressive model that you should have is first you have what you're concerned about versus what you can influence, and second you have like gradations of concern, like what you're willing to say, like I am the world's, I'm going to stay on top of everything that's happening in this field, versus I've decided not to care about this, versus I'll try it out and I'll try to have some opinion, but it's not that critical for me. And then going from levels of concern to having some action, right? Like having some 12 favorite problems or 12 pieces that you're trying to investigate, and then finally going from the Rogers curve, which is this very well-known crossing the chasm chart. Basically, the Wardley map is essentially taking the Rogers curve and then putting another dimension on it, right? Like saying, like, in case in the curve of adoption, where is it in the value chain from raw materials or the raw machines to the end user? And then plotting on a chart like this, you can get a 2D map of the general ecosystem. So that's kind of what I was trying to communicate in this chapter. There's a bit more about hype cycles and adoption cycles of technology. These are all the basic concepts that you need to know in order to think about technology adoption and where you want to be. So I'll just mention it there. Okay, so yeah, Brian talked about negotiations. Hassan talked about AWS. Yep. Very true. Okay, so I wanted to cover, like, so what specifically you're modeling about was this. What are your doubts or questions, or where do you want to be? You said you want to be here?
No, I was basically trying to, because this is from a, like, let's say from a web application point of view, right? Because there's lots of different things, and I was thinking about what's gonna be like areas that are gonna be really interesting in the future, right? And I think kind of performance and stuff like that, like that's very much baked into most frameworks, in my opinion. So it's not really like, it's really important, like the user needs good performance, but it's not that you can't do it badly, but it's something that mostly comes out of the box, in my, like, I would say. And like the differentiation for the user experience is, like, for me, like a lot about the animation that you kind of provide, because they can be very, very cool and make a big difference on how your web app is perceived, and also the integrations with other applications. And for me, like, integrations has always been like a big topic, because integrations are really difficult to do, and they're always custom built. Like for 30 years, they have always been custom built, and it's difficult for me to say like why it didn't go into product yet. But like, if that happens, it's going to be a huge shift, right? And like, there are things like Zapier that do it a bit more productized integration, but it's still kind of far away. I don't know if it's far away, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so this is interesting. Okay, so first of all, animation, like, did everyone see the example that I posted this week? I think reeve.app. Oh, that was you. Okay, so you already know about it. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. So then the second thing I was going to mention was, if you're talking about integrations, going from custom build to products, I think Zapier is a clear example of that. But this other company that I've been talking to is called Airbyte, and their integration is the product. So they have connectors to like hundreds of other data sources from them and to them. So you can basically just take all the platforms that you're using, all the software that you're using as a company, pipe it into a cloud data warehouse like Snowflake, BigQuery. I forget what this is, RDS, Postgres, and MySQL, or other formats. All this used to be handwritten, and probably now this is the emerging standard for integrations. So there's a little bit of this going on. That's very insightful. I think maybe there might be a developer experience side of this that hasn't been considered, like productivity, right? There's user experience, which is really good, but there's a developer productivity side. Maybe like like if you flip this chart around and you invert it from the developer's point of view, there might be other dimensions to consider, and to start thinking about developer tools rather than the user tools. For better or worse, like developer tools have been the ones making a fair amount of money as well. The focus. Whenever I see user experience, the flip side is developer experience, right? Just try to see how to integrate this worldview with a broader perspective. But there's a lot of developer experience here, and you seem to view all that as commodity. This actually reminds me of the other part of the book about the layers, where if you sort of superimpose this. Where is it? Oh yeah, Discord. it's interesting that, you have frameworks. I have frameworks here, and then you have hosting down here, programming language on the same level as well, but more commoditized. It's just an interesting view of like how you organize this. Like, so you also have users at the top, and so maybe like this is the kind of the 2D expansion of this. And if you wanted more things to add, you can sort of refer to this sort of ranking and have a look at how you think this might fit in. Just a thought. Basically,
Yeah, true,
every level should treat the previous level as a clean abstraction. So you no longer really, you take it for granted. It just scales infinitely. You don't really have to think about it. But then when you go down to that lower level, you're like, oh, actually, no, there's a lot of nuance to this, and that's how you keep going down the stack. Okay. Yeah. Hassan is dropping a lot of DevTools hot takes in there. Okay, so any other there was a lot of discussion. I haven't caught up on it. I was just quite busy. But yeah, any other questions or discussions that you wanted to bring up, Max?
No, I just wanted to share a bit what I've been doing and thinking about, to be honest. I mean, it was great to have some feedback on it, because I mean, like, obviously, like, this is very niche, and was the first time for me doing it. So thanks for the feedback.
Simon Wardley is on Twitter, and if you tweet at him, he's gonna probably review your mapping if you want him to do that. He's a very interesting Twitter personality, but yeah, I think people tweet him with like their attempts at mapping stuff, and then he does it live. It's very Pepe Silva, but you just haven't talked about it. He has very interesting style, and I think he's pretty responsive. So give it a try.
All right. Yeah.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Thanks.
So yeah, I mean, I try not to stay too close to him. I just take the general idea that, okay, what's valuable for me? It's valuable to understand how close you are to the money, like the users, whether or not you want to be. And if you're invisible, that's not necessarily bad. You just need to be providing clear value in some other way. And then it's also valuable to understand what the breaks are between each point, and understand how much money can be made when you take something from custom to productize, and from productize to commodity. Those are my main messages. The specifics of how he does this is very intimidating and scary. I don't really like that. Okay, yeah. So
I'll add a tip though. So I just linked to a Twitter account of a guy called Ben Moiser.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he says his last name. He teaches Wardley mapping. He learned it himself, and he does a lot of things. Like if Simon Wardley is like, if that is too much for you, like Ben simplifies things. Like he often tweets saying, "Give me your profile, and I'll Wardley map your profile." So he may be a yeah. He's a nice guy. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I've seen him in Tiago's course before. So he seems he's another guy who you can go to. Like he is sort of he could be a 101 or 201 level Wardley mapping guy.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, really.
That's a follow.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah. Yep. So let's see. Has he done it? What is this? Why is it animated? So this guy, okay. What is he doing? He's like a sketch artist almost. Ooh, look at that. Look at that move. All right. It's interesting. Well, there's a lot here that could
he studies Wardley mapping. Like I've not really done it personally, but I think he teaches Wardley mapping, and he's been studying that for a while.
Yeah. That's cool. All right, I haven't come across this before. All right, awesome. And the book.
I think he used to be Tiago's course manager back in like V2, V3 of building a second brain. Yeah.
And now it's at V14, V15 already.
Yeah.
Time flies. Okay, so yeah, that's Wardley mapping. I think it's a useful exercise. I think it's possible to be too generic. In fact, probably Max, like the feedback that I would give you is like user programming language. This is still too high level. You want to focus in on an industry. Like try to define an industry. I think this is still too broad. This is like just generic web applications. Maybe you can be a bit more specific about that. Is it maybe e-commerce?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, like whatever industry you're really trying to focus in on, because like it really gets specific when you put logos on things, and really start thinking about like, okay, are they in the right spot, or is it time to move this from here to here? And you start to generate really interesting questions of like things that you can build. Okay.
Good point. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, welcome. No, thank you for sharing this. I think this is a lot of people don't really view themselves as thinking about tech strategy that much, but I think it's super important, especially if you're betting your career and trying to figure out what to learn. Okay, all right, that was useful. Does anyone else have other topics before we go on to prepared book stuff? Okay, looks like there was a stream. This guy likes to do live mapping. That's his whole thing. All right. Any other topics that people want to talk about? Okay. No. So I'll go through the.
So
I
had a question, maybe now or maybe later. It's sort of, I don't know if it's controversial. What is the future of software developers? I'm not talking top tier. They're always going to have something. Software developers in the US, like, do you like it? It's sort of like in this morning when I went for my walk this morning, I was thinking sort of along Wardley mapping, where there's this movement of when tools get really good for remote work, and when and we are able to hire worldwide, what happens to software engineering as a career in the US, and especially in expensive areas? Like where would it land? Maybe it's some sort of a, like, Wardley mapping could sort of apply there, like, but it's not necessarily exactly that, right? But you see, there's going to be movement of.
So
Yeah.
the hot take version of this would be, what happens if the thing that is becoming commoditized is software engineers, right? You used to custom build software engineers, then maybe they can be a product when boot camps and colleges can print out software engineers, and then when software engineers become a commodity is when you start racing to the bottom in terms of price. That could happen. I think this is an offshoot of our previous discussion, Jay, on outsourcing. So we've kind of talked about this before. Like, there's some pricing power. There's different labor markets depending on what tier you're perceived to be in. Yeah, I think it's definitely partially happening, but as far as I can tell, at least in my circles, in like Silicon Valley startup circles, not happening at all. So
yeah. So it's I want to hear opinions and generally to think about it. The way we'll go. Like, one thing that I've observed in ops, like in DevOps, this has happened in microcosms before. Back when I started 15 years ago, we had a whole team just to do code deployments and releases. That's it, right? And infrastructure, 10, 20 people and multi-millions of dollars to build this website. Like, we spent $20 million. This was at AAA 15 years ago, or close to 20 years ago. We paid $20 million to launch a website for AAA, right? We gave Accenture that much money, plus there was a team. Now, all of those roles are compressed into one guy. Right? Or maybe not even that. The developers are deploying. Maybe that's what will become to developers. Like, we won't go away. It is just like, as a developer, you have to write code. You have to think about design, product design, and whatnot. Right? I think all of these roles will be compressed into one person. It will be expected from one guy. Maybe. Right?
Well, you're essentially outsourcing it to platforms, right? Like, now we have GitHub. Now we have with Jenkins or whatever the tool is, like, you're essentially replacing it with SaaSes. And I think that's going to be useful for 90 something percent of the use cases. And then there's always going to be like the 5 to 10% that need to bring it in-house. And they'll do that. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I think basically we keep delegating away not uninteresting problems, and we keep the real interesting business logic and unique differentiating factors in-house. And I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
And probably good. Yeah, the gap will grow, Max will say. Yeah. It's very, very common in capitalism for the rich to get richer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's happening to all industries, to be honest. Like even like if you are in like doctors and things like that, like there is always a top percent that with the kind of push to digitalization, like will earn more money because they put their stuff online maybe, or they offer like online services and things like that. They can scale themselves much better. And then there is everyone else who, like, unfortunately, has not this opportunity. And like, it's very common, like in most industries, to be honest, that there is like really, really top earners, and the others kind of are like that. I feel like that's kind of the trend where we're going. I mean,
yeah, quite possible. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that, like, not within our control. We should just have to do the best that we can, and try to get ourselves in as high a tier as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to evolve somehow. There's going to be some evolution. Just wondering how that evolution will look like. Maybe smaller teams would be able to produce more. There'll be winner take all sort of effects. Like small teams being able to, like, one guy doing all the coding and the other guy is doing. I think you have good exposure to startups, right? Like, are you seeing small startup teams achieving things that larger teams had to do before, that needed larger teams in startups?
Definitely, I'll call out Superbase. I worked at a competitor at AWS that probably had 10 times their resources and staffing, and they ship faster. So
got it. Okay. Maybe Replit seems to be another one that Amjad Mazar, like.
Yeah. He opened up a funding round. He had just at a conference actually, and he was dropping some updates. None of the updates seem that interesting, but I think Replit as a whole seems to be growing massively. So it's like, okay, do you believe that this is the new form of compute that the next generation is going to take on compared to coding on your laptop? And if you want to, you can invest in Replit. That's a new thing that just came up. Brian.
Yeah, I actually wanted to build off of what Jay was just talking about. That's been something that's definitely been on my mind. So when you think of like jobs, so I'm trying to think of like job security long term, and I was just also thinking of like companies and how you have a place in the market. So Replit, right? There's Code Sandbox, Gitpod is doing stuff. There's a lot of different companies that are similar, and I'm just trying to understand, like, what gives developers at each of those companies utility? Is it the ability to innovate and build cool complex things that the team at Replit isn't doing? That Code Sandbox, they figure out this hashing algorithm that's super secure and it does something to code and no one else has it. Like, is it the complexity of the ideas or just shipping faster stuff? So there's feature requests coming in, these devs can just go and build it and it's just faster. Like, I'm trying to understand, like, what gives these developers, like, not just higher salaries, but like more utility in a company. Is it that ability to just do a whole bunch of stuff, or is it the complexity of the problem solved?
You're talking about the people working there?
Yeah, like when you hire a dev team and the company's scaling, right? They're raising, pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, that type of stuff. Is it just because of their ability to just like ship features, or is it their ability to make like IP code that is complex and innovative?
What if I told you neither?
Oh, then I'd be worried because I thought it was at least one of them. Oh, I know.
Because you haven't mentioned anything about customers, and I feel like that's pretty important.
Yeah, they're the ones that are going to use it, right? Like, I remember with Replit, the IntelliSense like wasn't working, and I was like super frustrated about it because I'm just like, wait, I do like H1, why is it not closing the H1 tag? And it's like, seems so easy, but that doesn't seem super complex, but it's annoying as a customer of that platform. So maybe so is it really customer specific focused, and then the complexity is in the back end related to what customers want? Like, is that the way to think of it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a way. The complexity is a way to get customers, right? Because you're saving them that work that they would have to do it themselves. But that's one way to do it, and it's just one of many ways to do it. Arguably, like DoorDash is an $80 billion business, and they take orders and they send out orders. Like the rest, like it's not like, obviously I'm sure there's very interesting tech at DoorDash, but ultimately you also have to work on your fulfillment and your inventory or your listings, whatever, what have you. But like there's a lot to like, ultimately what's going to drive the growth in the company and the valuations is getting customers and revenue.
Yeah. And then as you want to apply, so like kind of like full stack track, that's kind of like what I'm trying to achieve. So is it like, as I'm thinking, and this might generalize to other people too, but it's like, as I'm applying to jobs, am I looking to be building features? Am I looking to be implementing like core infrastructure for a product? Like, what is the most highest leverage for an individual person? Or maybe it's variable. Maybe there's no like one right answer for any of that.
There's no right answer.
Yeah.
But I will say, so I keep track of alumni startups. Startups. There we go. So my thesis is that you should go work at household name companies with large scale problems, and then work on core infra at those companies. And then when you have built those core infra, you spin it out as a separate company, and then you sell it to everyone else, saying this works for us at Uber, therefore you should use it. And that's like so many companies. And there's a lot of developer tool companies that are building with this exact framework. PlanetScale is an interesting story because PlanetScale is a combination of this works for us at GitHub and this works for us at YouTube, therefore you should use us. And we have all the best people. So that's a very simple pitch. That's like such an easy pitch. Anyway, so it's interesting to think about, like, if you work on core infra, that can be a future business in future, and you're essentially given the biggest testing grounds on earth to go write your code and get experience and understand the problem. So I think that's valuable in the sense that it's transferable. If you're a feature dev, you work on the feature, it may not be transferable to other things in the future. So maybe consider that, but maybe the feature is so important. Like, so Patrick McKenzie likes to say that he has a friend that works on Google Ads. Like 90% of Google's revenue runs through his code, right? That's one feature, but like, he's good. He's probably very well off. So I don't know, just if you work on a good enough feature, then you don't have to worry about any of the boring infra stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you also for sharing that. That's like, I've seen that kind of come out of like, this is good enough for these other companies. It's like, that's their pitch.
Oh, so it's so common, right? Like the problem is actually overselling that. So yeah, I think this is actually in Patrick's salary negotiation piece. So if you just kind of go in there, Google. Okay, I don't know where it is. Definitely you should read the salary negotiation piece. I recap it in my negotiation chapter. But he has a different piece on Google search code. I'm not sure if I will be able to find it. It's somewhere inside of his blog, but I'm not going to be able to find it right now. Yeah, so feature versus infra. I bias towards infra because I've seen so many successes, and it's really like not that hard. Like, because you come out with a brand name and you come out with like a lot of experience, that it's very hard to get. Like, it's pretty much the best starting point you can have as an entrepreneur. Yeah, and feature wise, you have to find the feature that everybody really wants and likes using. So yeah, that'll be my TLDR on that decision. But I think definitely it's something you should practice, right? Like, so instead, in lieu of doing it yourself, I think something that you can do at high velocity is look at the announcements that people make and try to form an opinion about whether or not this thing is valuable and it's going to work out. A lot of the times, it's very common to look at a new announcement and kind of dismiss it, or not really try to think through like what the implications of that are. So, for example, one thing I was pretty early to was Slack, and how when they launched. Does everyone know what Slack Connect is? So, okay, so I see a lot of nods. Yeah, so when Slack Connect launched, like whichever dev or team was working on that added billions of dollars of lifetime revenue to Slack, like just because it's so much stickier. Because when you think about the network effect being entrenched, like you're no longer network affecting within one company, you're network affecting between multiple companies. All of them want to stay on Slack now, and that makes the product so much stickier. So that one feature made up for probably a lot of wandering around in Slack, where like they acquired Screen Hero, they deprecated it, they built other stuff that was not needle moving. The Slack Connect team, let's say like you rewind 1 to 2 years before they launched Slack Connect. As you heard of that feature internally within your company, you need to be hyper attentive to that and saying like, okay, this is a career making move. If I make it extremely clear I want to move to that team because I think it's important for the company, right? So that is a career strategy move that is nothing to do with your ability to code. It's just like you understand how important one thing is to your company and how much value it might create, and how important it is for you to be associated with that value. But it is still a bet on a feature. It's not an infra thing. It's not that transferable. Maybe it's transferable in the sense of like if other companies want to build the same thing, they can hire you to do that. But that's less interesting. Chad.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. So like, in that kind of example, you kind of point out that you point out that you're in a company and then there's a new project and I'm hoping I'm getting this right, but you're in a company, there's a new project, you see the value in that project, so you invest in that project by going there, and hopefully that will that works out and effectively makes your career. I guess focusing on specific technologies is how you do that if you're not necessarily attached to a company that you don't necessarily see a lot of value. You don't see opportunities for value, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but it's a means to an end, right? The end goal is to actually get on that team. Whatever you can do to convince them, can be I don't know, getting coffee to learning to building a sample app that like already demonstrates that you've already thought through the main problems that people are going to face in that journey. Everything is game. You just need to get it on your resume by whatever means.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I see people are timing out. So this is an awesome discussion. There's a 1 hour where we just like went and riffed on a bunch of strategy stuff. And thanks to Max for kicking off the strategy discussion, and Jay and everyone else. And we had a nice chat about negotiation as well. So a very classic coding career meetup session. Yeah, so this week we're supposed to like kind of cover Platinum Rule and Good Enough. I think these are really good sort of senior engineer type interpersonal skills / like tech choice type chapters. Definitely go through and read and discuss if you want to go over those. Next week we'll be covering first principles thinking, which is more theoretical again, and writing as a principle for your career. So we'll cover that. I think pick up what they put down, we already covered. So I'm just going to rearrange this order. But these two topics are what we can cover next week if we don't have anything else to discuss. But otherwise, that was a great chat. Yeah. Thanks, Dorian. Yeah, I haven't heard from you much, but glad you're here. And yeah, really, like this is a chill meetup, right? Like it's a weekend, like we're just chatting on Zoom. I just try to create a space where we can talk career stuff, and really appreciate you guys for joining us. Okay, well, that's it. Thanks to everyone. I'm going to play my clap off music, but otherwise you can go. I'm wiring up sharing my computer audio and then going. That's my end. Bye.